It was night when the soft glow of the lamp cast elongated shadows on the nursery floor, swaying in time with the curtain that danced in the breeze. At the center of the room was a small white crib, sheltering the delicate sleep of a newborn, whose serene breathing contrasted with the tension that seemed to permeate the atmosphere. Next to the crib, unmoving, was Duke, a sturdy pit bull with a dark coat who, under normal circumstances, would be the very embodiment of protective strength and canine loyalty. Yet on that silent night, there was something different in his gaze. He ignored any command or treat. He remained steadfast, like a sentry on high alert. His ears were pricked toward the window, and now and then a soft growl rumbled in his throat, so low it barely broke the silence. That unusual behavior hovered over them like an enigma. Normally, Duke would obey Ethan's call, take a treat, and leave the room or move to another part of the house, but nothing seemed to work now. The pit bull simply refused to leave the crib's side, as though sensing something that no one else could perceive. At first, it might have seemed like the overprotective instincts of a devoted dog. However, Duke's stubbornness was so intense that it caught the attention of anyone who stepped into that room. Those dark eyes, fixed on the window, suggested that something hidden from human senses lurked outside. Ethan, a man of calm demeanor, short hair, and perpetually serene expression, watched everything with a mix of curiosity and concern. Beside him, Olivia, gentle in her gestures yet with a restless look, tried to steady her heart each time she faced that scene. She would place a hand on Ethan's shoulder and quietly ask, "What do you think is going on? Why is he acting like that?" Deep down, her greatest worry was for her daughter, sleeping peacefully, unaware of any tension. Any parent would feel anguished seeing their trusted dog behaving so strangely, insisting on staying glued to that window. But Duke's past already hinted at nuances of unusual behavior. To understand better how the pit bull reached that point, one would have to go back a few years, when Ethan and Olivia never imagined they would form such a unique family. They lived in a spacious house that always seemed a bit empty. The couple longed for a child, but faced difficulties and disappointments at every attempt. After countless medical appointments and negative results, sadness took hold, leaving an emotional void that was hard to fill. One rainy day, Olivia returned devastated from the doctor's office upon learning once more that she wasn't pregnant. Passing by an animal shelter, she saw a pit bull with sorrowful eyes leaning against the cage, so quiet that it stood out from all the barking dogs around him. She cautiously approached the cage, but a sudden affection overcame her. The dark-coated, robust-looking dog stared back calmly, without barking or growling, merely tilting his head as if he could see the pain Olivia carried. The connection was immediate. Something in that tranquil gaze seemed to say, "I understand you." And that same day, Olivia convinced Ethan to adopt the pit bull, christening him Duke. It was as though, in some way, that animal was destined to fill part of the void left by the absence of a child. In the beginning, Ethan was apprehensive because of the prejudices surrounding pit bulls, but it took little time to recognize the sweetness and unconditional loyalty that radiated from Duke. The dog slept at the foot of their bed, followed Olivia around the house, lay beside her when she cried, and in a very tangible way became her emotional support. The days started to feel lighter. Olivia's smiles reappeared, and whereas once the house's silence distressed her, now the thudding of Duke's paws and the way he rested his head on her lap brought a sense of companionship and affection. After years of living together, a new light shone in the couple's life. Olivia finally became pregnant. When the test came back positive, she broke down in tears, hugging Ethan and whispering words of gratitude. Duke sniffed the air, circling them, though not fully understanding the euphoria overtaking his owners. With each doctor's visit and every ultrasound, the couple's affection for Duke only grew. They felt that, in a way, he had helped them endure the pain of the past, giving them strength not to give up. And once the pregnancy was confirmed, Olivia's bond with the pit bull seemed to deepen even more. During the pregnancy, Duke followed his owner everywhere, lying close to her belly whenever she sat or rested. Each time the baby moved, he perked up his ears as though he heard something only his instincts could detect. After 9 months of anxious waiting, the baby was born. A healthy girl, bright-eyed, pink-skinned, who completely illuminated that home. Overjoyed, Ethan and Olivia brought the little one home, certain that from then on their lives would overflow with happiness. As soon as they arrived, they introduced Duke to the baby, letting him gently sniff her tiny feet and hands. They observed that instead of barking or becoming agitated, he merely brought his muzzle close and took a deep breath, showing a sort of reverent respect. From then on, he behaved like a silent guardian, attentive to everything happening around that child. First, it was charming to watch the Pitbull supervise each of the baby's naps, always lying near the crib. If she cried, Duke was there to peek at her face and check if everything was okay. Yet, as the weeks passed, the dog's constant presence began bordering on obsession. He practically refused to leave the baby's room, even when the couple called him. Treats and toys had no effect. It was as if some greater force compelled him to stay there. Ethan was intrigued but didn't see much harm in Duke's behavior. After all, there didn't seem to be any aggression, just a need to be on guard. Olivia, on the other hand, couldn't ignore her growing unease. She worried that a sudden canine instinct might cause Duke to move abruptly and hurt her daughter. As much as she trusted him, the sight of a sturdy pit bull near a creature so fragile made her heart tighten. She voiced her concerns to Ethan, who tried to reassure her. He pointed out that Duke had never shown any sign of aggression, that he was a balanced, loving dog. Still, Olivia remained uneasy, especially whenever she noticed Duke spending long minutes staring at the nursery window, as though something beyond the glass was disturbing him. Weeks turned into months. The baby grew healthy, and Duke maintained the same watchful behavior. Then, on a night when the silence seemed deeper than usual, he began to growl. This time it wasn't a soft or occasional rumble, but a more resolute one that echoed through the space and reached Olivia and Ethan in the living room. They both rushed to the nursery. They found Duke standing in alert mode, focused on the window. His fur was bristled, and he paid no attention to his owners. Startled, Olivia picked up her daughter from the crib and hugged her instinctively. Ethan went over to the window, pulled back the curtain, but saw nothing to justify the dog's stance. Heart pounding, he approached Duke to calm him, but the pit bull kept growling, as if staring down an invisible enemy. This scene repeated itself for 2 more consecutive nights, always at the same time, around 2:30 in the morning. Determined to figure out what was happening, Ethan remembered that the baby monitor could record whenever it detected noise or movement, so he decided to check the footage from the previous nights. Watching the videos, he saw that exactly when Duke began to growl, the hallway lights remained steady. Nothing unusual happened in the nursery besides the dog's behavior, but his posture changed abruptly, fixing on the window. It was an unsettling pattern that repeated flawlessly. Puzzled, Ethan asked Olivia to review the footage with him. She felt a chill too, seeing that behavior. It only confirmed her suspicion that something was truly wrong. Then they remembered. They had external security cameras, though not the highest quality. They spent much of the night combing through every minute of the recordings. For a while, nothing odd appeared. The street was quiet, no cars passed by, only trees rustling in the wind, until at one point, a shadow drifted alongside the house, skirting the wall and stopping right in front of the baby's window. It was impossible to see the face because the figure wore a hood and seemed determined not to be identified. Still, it was clear that someone was spying on the house, specifically focused on the bedroom where the little one slept. Olivia's heart pounded. She covered her mouth with her hand, trying to suppress her terror at the thought that someone was sneaking up to her daughter's window in the middle of the night. Ethan by her side turned pale, advancing the video frame by frame, hoping for better clarity. When Duke appeared on the internal monitor, growling, the figure outside moved, as though it too sensed something or heard the dog through the glass. Then it vanished into the shadows. This was no mere coincidence. It became clear that the Pitbull had detected the intruder's presence, but due to vocal cord damage suffered as a puppy, as the shelter had explained, he was unable to bark normally, so he resorted to soft growls to warn his owners. No more doubts remained. Someone was skulking around the house, specifically targeting the baby's room. The possibility that something far worse than mere voyeurism was going on weighed heavily on the couple, increasing their sense of vulnerability. Who was that stranger? What did he want? Olivia recalled news stories about child abductions, criminals who studied families' routines and pounced on security lapses. The thought that something could happen to her daughter was horrifying. They decided they couldn't delay contacting the police. They called the next day, reported what they had seen, and turned over the recordings to the authorities. After examining the material, the police recognized the severity of the situation. The person didn't appear to be wandering randomly. You could see they circled around specifically to the window, as if trying to peer inside. The recommendation was to tighten security and stay alert, while a team began conducting night patrols in the neighborhood. Even with the increased police presence, the family couldn't escape their sense of dread. Olivia hardly slept, imagining what might happen if that man managed to break in. She felt a chill at the thought that she'd once doubted Duke's intentions, fearing he might harm the baby, when in truth he'd been trying to save her from genuine danger. Within the same week, on one of those tense nights, Duke began growling again. It was 2:30 in the morning, right on schedule. Ethan and Olivia woke up, now used to the unsettling punctuality of the dog's alert. Ethan ran to the window, his heart pounding, and managed to glimpse a figure fleeing when he noticed activity inside. He called the police immediately. The patrol cars, already on alert in the vicinity, arrived in minutes and located the individual. He tried to escape through the back of an empty lot but was apprehended in the act. Later, upon investigating the detainee's history, the police discovered he was involved in a string of child abductions in the region, always choosing quiet residential areas and spying on the houses at night to learn the family's routines. When Olivia and Ethan received the news about the man's identity, the world around them seemed to blur. It dawned on them how close they'd come to tragedy. If not for Duke's unrelenting vigil, growling at the window, how many more nights might have passed before that criminal tried something real? They thanked their lucky stars that they'd listened to the dog's instincts. Olivia felt a twinge of guilt for ever doubting Duke, but also an immense gratitude. He had protected her daughter's life, risking being misunderstood, all out of loyalty and love. The internal impact of this event was immediate. While the police formalized charges and continued the investigation, Ethan and Olivia decided they could no longer live in that house with all its memories of fear and uncertainty. They resolved to move somewhere safer, with modern security systems, in a neighborhood they felt comfortable raising their daughter. It was a moment of transition, and although they felt sad leaving the home where they'd built so many memories, they didn't want to risk repeated nightmares and anxiety every time night fell. At this point, some family members and close friends, upon hearing what had happened, urged Ethan and Olivia to share Duke's story. Many people underestimate unusual signs in their pets or hold biases against certain breeds like pit bulls. Friends argued that it was important to alert others so they'd pay attention when their animals try to communicate, however subtly. Ethan considered the idea but was hesitant at first, wary of exposing his family's private life. However, once he remembered how Duke had saved them, he changed his mind. Olivia also realized it could help other mothers, and might help correct misconceptions about so-called dangerous breeds. So after a long discussion, they decided to prepare a detailed account, from Duke's adoption to the criminal's capture. They wanted people to understand that a dog's instincts can be sharper than humans give them credit for, and to show that behind a seemingly intimidating appearance, there can be a gentle, heroic soul. This wasn't about bragging, but about teaching and inspiring. And during a family dinner, one younger relative, into social media and video production, suggested, "You should turn this into a well-produced video that could reach a lot of people." The idea sounded strange at first, but the more they thought about it, the more sense it made. In planning the filming, Ethan and Olivia again discussed how careful they should be. They didn't want it to come across as staged or cheap. Sensationalism. It needed to be genuine, telling the story in a natural way and showing Duke in his everyday life. As they outlined it, they realized a compelling narrative needs a beginning, middle, and end, and it's crucial to maintain enough engagement so that viewers stay until the pivotal part, where Duke's heroism becomes irrefutable. They decided to include clips of him resting in the new house, showing how he was finally relaxed, free of the tension that had pinned him to the nursery window. That was when the idea arose, quite organically, to include a request for people who watched the story to not only be moved by it, but to help spread the message. The couple understood that to reach a wide audience, they needed engagement. During the recordings, Ethan mentioned that at some point, it would be important to say that if people liked or felt touched by the story, they could hit the like button, comment, and subscribe. It wouldn't sound forced if it fit seamlessly into the story's flow, since the cause of responsible adoption and awareness was sincerely important to them. When they finally began filming, they decided to start by showing Duke next to the baby, now bigger, playing in the backyard of their new home. The Pitbull, who for so long was stigmatized as dangerous, lay peacefully, allowing the little girl to stroke his coat with her tiny hands. The camera captured the overflowing affection. Then the narration would explain how they got there, from Duke's adoption and Olivia's frustration over infertility, right up to the point when Duke refused to leave the nursery, ignoring treats and commands, growling at an invisible threat. In this way, the story of the suspicious figure, the security footage analysis, the police intervention, and the ultimate relief would become clear, culminating in an emotional climax that highlighted Duke's heroism. They didn't just want to entertain with the video. They wanted to show in detail the importance of paying attention to subtle signals pets can give us. Upon reaching the critical part of the story, those nights Duke spent growling at the window, they planned to emphasize how those signals were initially underestimated. Right there, they decided to insert, organically, a call for viewers to share their own experiences in the comments. They wanted to encourage the exchange of stories and, especially, to promote the adoption of dogs so often judged without reason. So at a certain point in the video, it would show something like, if you, watching us right now, have gone through a similar situation or have a pet with a remarkable protective instinct, tell us about it in the comments. It's important that more people learn to recognize these signs, and if you think this story might touch someone's heart, share it too. For us, every comment and every new subscriber is a step toward spreading life-saving messages. This message would fit the narrative flow without seeming forced. The more they reviewed the script, the more they realized how central Duke's behavior change was to the story. Initially, it was seen as something cute, a protective dog, but then Olivia began to fear him, interpreting his fixation as a risk to the baby. In the end, he was proven to be real protection. It was symbolic that everything shifted soon, after the baby was born, as if Duke had sensed a new life in the home, so utterly defenseless that it required his constant guardianship. His grand heroic act occurred when he sensed the presence of the figure lurking outside. In the video, they also planned to show how they discovered the pattern of nightly visits by scrutinizing the internal and external footage. Scenes from the baby monitor and the outdoor security camera, even if somewhat blurry, would enhance the tension and illuminate the fear that seized the family. And of course, it would end with the suspect's arrest, thanks to Duke. They would conclude with scenes of Duke and the baby in the backyard of the new house, laughing and playing, to contrast with the earlier fear. There, Olivia would explain how she had often misjudged the dog and felt guilty, yet eternally grateful for his actions. Ethan would then clarify how they bolstered their home's security and how they planned to remain vigilant without succumbing to paranoia. The ending would be hopeful, showcasing how the family finally found peace after such a harrowing ordeal. At that point, as the video neared its conclusion, they'd include another invitation. If you've made it this far and have been moved by this journey, help us show the world that love and protection can come from the least likely places. Like this video, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment. Let us know what you think, what you've learned, or share your own story if it can help others. Together, we can create a strong network of support, affection, and awareness. With the script ready, only one chapter remained unwritten: the transformation of daily life in their new home. Olivia and Ethan settled into a calm neighborhood, surrounded by tall walls and good neighbors. The baby's room, decorated in soft tones, had safer windows, screens, and alarm systems. Duke, who once refused to leave the crib, was now just a regular dog enjoying the yard and walks. His permanent state of alertness was gone, replaced by a serenity they hadn't realized was missing before. His protective instinct remained, but it seemed he understood that there was no threat in this new place. One afternoon, a moving scene reaffirmed the sense of peace in that home. The baby, nearly a year old, tried to crawl through the grass in the backyard. She lost her balance and started to topple forward unsteady. In a fraction of a second, Duke placed himself beside her, cushioning the fall. She let out a tiny laugh, relieved, and stroked the dog's face as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Olivia, watching, felt a pang of emotion, remembering how many times she had underestimated Duke's sensitivity. At that moment, she realized that, for as long as it depended on him, her daughter would never be alone in her first steps. As months went by, the marks left by the past gradually healed. For Ethan and Olivia, telling their story was a kind of catharsis, a way to transform fear into learning and love. They received messages from hundreds of people who watched or heard their account and were inspired to pay more attention to the signals their pets gave, or who decided to adopt dogs from so-called aggressive breeds, only to discover sweet, loyal companions. They also received thank you notes from families who'd gone through something similar and hadn't known how to handle it. Every testimonial reinforced their sense of a mission fulfilled. The video's success was a pleasant surprise, but what really mattered were the genuine comments and the stories people shared about their pets and how they felt a deeper bond after seeing Duke's example. Some said they had learned not to ignore behaviors they once deemed nonsensical. Others, who were afraid of Pitbulls, started seeing the breed differently. Some were moved to adopt a dog themselves upon realizing they could offer it a loving home. With each passing day, the couple's daughter grew, and Duke became an essential part of her childhood. He was present for her first words, her first confident steps, and would likely be there when she began speaking in full sentences, running around the yard and even wanting trips to the park. That pit bull with the gentle gaze, once found in a shelter, was now the family's biggest hero, finally enjoying the life every animal deserves. A life of affection, care, and recognition that he was more than just a dog. He was a guardian. Moving to the new house also marked a new beginning. The memory of the dark times would never fully fade, but it served as a warning that evil can lurk unnoticed. On the other hand, it reminded them that sometimes protection comes subtly, in behaviors we don't immediately understand. Watching their daughter play one morning, Ethan spoke to Olivia about the powerful lesson they had learned. Sometimes, we only recognize the obvious once it's happened, but Duke taught us that we need to pay attention to anything unusual from the start. If it weren't for him, I hate to think what could have happened. She agreed, taking Ethan's hand and calling Duke over, as they often did for family moments. Once their daily life had settled, the couple allowed themselves to dream about the future. The once paralyzing fear was replaced by caution and knowledge. They became more vigilant, but also more grateful. They learned to value the small joys of day-to-day life and the presence of those they loved, be they two-legged or four-legged. Meanwhile, more and more people reached out, curious about the story that had gone viral. Some companies offered partnerships, but Ethan and Olivia had no interest in commercializing Duke's story. They preferred to focus on adoption awareness and dog training. turning down any offers that smacked of mere profit. Even so, at events and informal talks, they always emphasized, if your dog starts acting in a way you've never seen before, pay attention. Maybe he's trying to tell you something. And if it seems absurd, just remember Duke, who warned us of a danger we could never have imagined. Whenever they finished such a statement, they'd be met with hugs, applause, or at least moved looks. Someone would invariably say, "You have no idea how much I needed to hear that." Time passed, and their daughter was soon old enough to toddle through hallways. In those moments, Duke would be right there, watching closely, as if every stumble was a reason to protect her. When she fell, she'd only cry if she was hurt or startled, but if Duke was near, she'd calm down quickly. It was evident that she felt safe around him, even if unconsciously. The memory of those night terrors that once haunted the family now served as motivation for them never to ignore any warning sign. On one occasion, as Olivia was organizing photos in an album, she found an image of Duke shortly after his adoption, still looking a bit unsure, and smiled as she compared it to a more recent picture of him playing with her daughter. She thought about how differently things might have turned out if, on that rainy day, when she was so devastated about not being pregnant, she hadn't stopped at the shelter to look at the dogs. Perhaps Duke would still be in a cage, waiting for a home, never truly understood, and she and Ethan might have remained stuck in that emotional void even longer. She also reflected on how many people still deny the ability of animals to feel and sense things. Duke's every action had refuted that disbelief. One peaceful night in their new home, they organized a celebratory dinner to mark 1 year since everything had happened. They invited friends, relatives, neighbors, and even some of the police officers involved in the case. There was cake, soft music, and conversations that intermingled gratitude and joy. In the yard, the baby crawled back and forth while Duke followed at a safe distance, as always. When evening settled in, Olivia proposed a toast, lifting her glass with her left hand while using her right to pet Duke. Sometimes the best protection comes from where you least expect it. This is our hero. Applause, laughter, and emotional smiles filled the air. Some of the officers present, who knew the suspect's dark details, remarked that it was a miracle the child had been spared, and that Duke truly deserved the title, hero. After the celebration ended and the backyard lights were switched off, Ethan, Olivia, and their daughter gathered in the living room. Duke lay on the rug, watching the family with a calm gaze. Ethan and Olivia sat on the couch, watching, their little one still full of energy, exploring every corner. For a moment, Olivia recalled how it had all started. Duke standing by the crib, refusing to budge, refusing food or distractions. That image, once so troubling, now became a bittersweet memory. Had it not been for his insistence, they might have remained in that house unaware of the threat lurking outside. And perhaps, by now, the happiness enveloping them could have been shattered. A few days later, reviewing the footage for the video they intended to share, Ethan and Olivia decided the time had come to publish it. They tweaked details, added captions, cut out unnecessary parts. When they played it one last time to check, their hearts tightened at the scenes showing Duke quietly growling at the window and at the blurry outline of the intruder on the external camera. Even to them, who had lived through it, seeing it all was profoundly moving. The video ended with images of Duke and their daughter happy in their new home, set to gentle music, while a calm voice said, "Love and courage take many forms. In this family, it took the shape of a watchful dog, who couldn't bark but who fought for what he loved, even in silence." They posted it on a social platform, and within hours began receiving messages from people who were touched, some who cried, imagining the danger the child had faced, others who saw parallels with their own pets, and many asking how they could help spread the story. And as planned, there was a request at the end for likes, comments, subscriptions, and shares for those who found the story inspiring. For Ethan and Olivia, seeing these reactions was both cathartic and rewarding, because they weren't seeking fame. They simply wanted to show that animals possess immeasurable value and that we must pay attention when they insist on something. Over the following days, comments poured in, and Duke's story reached places they had never imagined. They were invited to share their story on podcasts, local shows, and adoption events. Some friends suggested they capitalize on this, but the couple had no intention of turning Duke's story into a commercial product. They always kept sight of the main message. Duke was a hero who proved that canine loyalty knows no bounds. Giving up some privacy to share that was merely a conscientious act. At one of the adoption events they attended, they brought Duke and, of course, their daughter. The Pitbull, calm and gentle, allowed children to pet him. Several visitors said they had watched the video and, because of it, had decided to adopt a dog, even if it was a breed unfairly deemed aggressive. This unexpected response made Ethan and Olivia think about how a genuine story can profoundly impact people's lives. They often recalled how Duke had been when they first saw him in the shelter, silent and alone, and compared it to the dog now surrounded by admirers. They felt deeply grateful, knowing that the Pitbull's heroic deed not only touched hearts, but could also save other dogs from being overlooked. After all, how many Dukes out there never get the chance to show their worth? During that time, their daughter kept growing. By the time she turned 2, there was no trace of the fear that once haunted the family. The new home was filled with love, and Duke only grew closer to everyone, winning over relatives and friends who had once been leery of pit bulls. The little girl, with bright, curious eyes, started calling Duke by a nickname, something like Doo-Doo, chasing after him around the backyard, giggling loudly whenever he paused to let her catch up. Many times it was impossible not to get emotional, recalling how her laughter might have been silenced by an unthinkable tragedy, if not for him. One afternoon, while relaxing on the porch, Ethan and Olivia asked themselves what lesson the whole ordeal had taught them. They concluded that Duke's instincts were a manifestation of the love he felt for them. His steadfast presence in the nursery was his desperate attempt to warn them, with no means besides growling or refusing to leave. If they could go back in time, they would have heeded his signals sooner. Still, they knew there was no sense in blaming themselves. Everything had worked out in time. The criminal was caught, and their daughter was safe. Their gratitude for that happy ending was something they passed on by sharing their story. Another time, in a local radio interview, Ethan was asked what advice he would give to pet owners. He paused for a moment before answering. Never underestimate what a dog, a cat, or any animal can sense. They live in a universe of smells, sounds, and perceptions we don't share. If a trusted pet suddenly changes its behavior, try to figure out why. It might be more serious than you think, and above all, return their love however you can. Animals don't speak, but they communicate everything through their eyes and their actions. After the intruder's arrest, the police continued investigating and discovered that he had attempted break-ins at other homes. The case got some local media coverage, and the man's face was publicly shown. There was no doubt that Ethan and Olivia's baby was in the crosshairs of a dangerous criminal. Knowing that was chilling yet further proved that Duke had been the critical barrier preventing a catastrophe. In a way, it was as if Duke had chosen that family not just to be cared for, but to repay them with protection at a crucial moment. In their new home, a ritual became common. Every night before putting their daughter to bed, Olivia would call Duke to give the room a once-over. He would walk around, sniff the window area, check things out, and then leave, signaling that everything was safe. The little girl, used to that routine, giggled like it was all a game. She probably didn't understand the significance, but she clearly felt comfortable seeing that Duke was always looking out for her. As the girl grew older and began to understand more, other touching moments arose. For instance, she would pick up a picture book and show Duke the images of dogs and other animals. She'd point with her tiny finger and say something resembling dog. Duke would tilt his head, as if trying to understand. Her gentle strokes on his ears or his face underscored her complete trust in him. She had no fear, only certainty that this big, dark-coated dog was her friend, her protector, almost like a guardian angel. Sometimes Ethan and Olivia still mentally replayed every detail of those nights Duke growled at the window, his body tense, eyes locked on the glass. They knew that if they hadn't taken him seriously, it might have been too late to identify the intruder. The mere thought of a kidnapping, or even an attempt, haunted them. But they focused on the positive. Duke was there, reminding them of his presence and the wrongness of the situation. When they showed understanding and investigated, they were able to intervene in time. The feeling of nighttime vulnerability that plagues many families was replaced by faith in their four-legged guard. That didn't mean they let their guard down altogether. Ethan had installed additional locks, motion sensors, and smart video monitoring in the new place. One can't forget how vulnerable they had been. Overconfidence can be costly, but unlike the heavy mood that once hung over them, a new calm now reigned. Even Olivia, who once equated every nighttime sound with hidden danger, slept better, trusting Duke to alert them again if needed. Because the story had grown so popular, some people asked why Ethan and Olivia didn't use Duke as a spokesdog for products or security services. They had no interest in marketing something so personal. They wanted the core message to remain clear: the importance of listening to animals' signals, adopting dogs in need, overcoming breed prejudices, and valuing the protective instincts of our pets. All proposals for merchandise were politely declined, except those that aligned with animal protection and rescue organizations. Those they might consider, provided there were no profit motives. At one point, an NGO invited Ethan and Olivia to participate in a Pitbull adoption awareness campaign, and they agreed. They took Duke along. The event featured informational stands about care and training, and a space with dogs awaiting adoption. When people recognized Duke, they approached, sharing that they'd watched the video or read the news article about him. Children would tentatively come up to pet him, and quickly realize how gentle he was. His presence helped dismantle stereotypes about pit bulls being inherently aggressive. The couple gave brief interviews, talking about their experiences and underscoring, love and responsibility go hand in hand. Take good care of your dog, watch for their signals, and return the loyalty they offer. The NGO volunteers were moved by the story and saw it as a chance to boost the adoption of larger breeds. At the end of the event, while packing up, they noticed an older man quietly crying, hugging a light-colored pit bull who looked a bit underweight. Concerned, they approached to see if he needed help. The man explained he couldn't understand how anyone could abandon such a pure-hearted creature. He said he'd come intending to adopt a dog, but Duke's story had especially touched him, and he'd chosen that pit bull. He wanted to give it a loving home. It was just one of many touching accounts that Ethan and Olivia would encounter after Duke's story went public. Arriving home that day, they felt every sacrifice had been worthwhile. Opening up about such personal things, recalling sleepless nights and the fear of almost losing their daughter to a criminal, it all became fuel to inspire people to choose love, security, and responsibility in a deeper way. Olivia wheeled the baby's stroller down the hallway. Duke followed calmly as usual, and Ethan carefully locked the door, taking one final glance at the security system. This routine, perhaps excessive to some, symbolized peace for them. Locking the house and feeling safe was a precious gift they'd once taken for granted. That night passed quietly, and time marched on. Their daughter, now nearly 3, had started speaking more clearly. To everyone's surprise, one of her first distinct words was the dog's name, Duke. She repeated it a few times in delight, clapping her hands, while the pit bull, perhaps, not realizing she was calling him, came over wagging his tail. Olivia was almost brought to tears, recognizing the symbolism. The child was calling by name the one who had guarded her before she even understood what danger was. When visitors came by, they immediately noticed the bond between Duke and the little one. If she wandered a bit too far, he tracked her with his gaze, seemingly measuring the safe distance to protect her. There were no more frantic growls or night watches by the window, unless something genuinely unusual happened, like a strange noise outside. Otherwise, he only growled playfully during games with toys or balls, never threatening. This made it clear that the anxiety once consuming him had entirely vanished. On a sunny afternoon, Ethan recorded a little home video of his daughter riding a tricycle in the backyard under Duke's watchful eye, planning to send it to distant relatives. Suddenly, he flashed back to how it had all begun, and to the original video they'd made about Duke. He thought of how much their lives had changed, and how that story still inspired people. He decided to edit a short update video showing their current peaceful life, thanks to Duke's heroism. Without high expectations, he posted it on his personal profile. Soon enough, it garnered attention again, with people leaving happy comments if they knew the story already, or curious inquiries if they didn't. It was proof that Duke's bravery still resonated. Spurred by this, some people proposed Ethan start a channel for regular updates on the dog and the child, but he and Olivia chose to keep things more private, posting only occasionally. Anyone deeply interested in the full backstory could still find the original accounts online. And so life went on, with no fame-seeking, just a quiet, continued legacy for those who searched for stories of heroic pit bulls or extraordinary animal behavior that saves human lives. Reflecting on their entire journey, they saw a clear moral about not judging a book by its cover, nor ignoring signals that nature or instinct provides. When Duke, the pit bull who couldn't bark, stepped into Ethan and Olivia's life, no one imagined how crucial he would become. The day he refused to leave the nursery, keeping an unwavering eye on the window night after night, triggered a chain of events that led to the capture of a kidnapper. If the pit bull had been able to speak human language, maybe they'd have understood his warning sooner. But he didn't need to speak. Even in silence, he used the only method he had: persistence. In the end, the story transcended Ethan and Olivia's home. Duke's example reflected all the times we overlook signs in life. It might be a gut feeling, a strange detail in someone's behavior, or a noise in the dead of night we dismiss as imagination. The lesson is that each odd behavior in our pets can stem from a bigger reason. Sometimes they're sick and trying to communicate discomfort. Other times, they sense danger because their senses surpass ours. Learning to read these signs is crucial. Many friends who saw the video shared that they too started paying closer attention to their animals. One neighbor discovered that his cat kept meowing incessantly near the bathroom wall because of a hidden leak weakening the structure. A cousin of Olivia's, in another city, mentioned that her dog used to sit by the door and growl quietly whenever a particular delivery person showed up. She'd found it strange, until discovering that the delivery person had made suspicious comments to neighbors. Different episodes, but connected by the insight that animals perceive the world differently. When Duke's 5th adoption anniversary came around, Ethan and Olivia threw him a small party. Nothing elaborate, just a cake, some special dog treats, and a few close friends who had followed the family's journey. Naturally, their daughter, now over 3, delighted in trying to put a birthday hat on Duke, who, unsure of the accessory, shook his ears. There was laughter, photos, and a sense of celebration for the bond they shared. Someone recalled how they first found Duke at the shelter, so quiet, and raised a toast. To the dog who didn't need to bark to be a hero. A simple toast, but deeply true. As everyone mingled reminiscing, Ethan said a few words from the heart. Maybe if it had just been up to us, we never would have noticed the stranger loitering near our house. Duke made us open our eyes and realize something sinister was happening outside. If anyone still doubts an animal's instincts, look at him now, happy, relaxed, because he knows the danger is behind us. Some clapped, others got emotional, and the party continued in that same warm, unpretentious spirit that defined the family. And that is how Duke's tale with Ethan and Olivia went on, gaining new meaning as time passed. Deep down, the real legacy of this dark-coated pit bull was the reminder to heed the warnings life sends us, to care for those we love, and to cast aside prejudice that blinds us. If, at first, it was merely strange that the dog wouldn't leave the baby's room, in the end, it revealed a story of heroism that saved a child from a kidnapper. The strong pit bull, unable to bark, still found a way to deliver the most vital warning that family could have ever received. Ultimately, the story reaches its moving conclusion. It's evident that Ethan and Olivia's now larger, happier family owes everything to Duke's unwavering protectiveness. Although the couple dislikes being in the spotlight, whenever someone asks, they share the details, emphasizing the importance of subscribing, commenting, and sharing the story, believing it might save other lives, or at least combat prejudice against so-called dangerous dogs. For some, it might sound like a modern-day fable, but for them, it's living proof that love and courage can emerge from the most unexpected places. In their new home, Duke has at last found the peace he deserves. Their baby, now a bright and lively child, grows up alongside the best friend she could ever have. And the story that began with a canine intuition and a low growl in the dead of night has become a celebration of loyalty, protection, and unconditional love.